But Ned Colletti joins us, former Giants assistant GM, former Dodger GM. And it's baseball season. Pitchers and catchers have reported. Giants have begun spring training, and hope is everywhere around baseball, at least till the regular season starts here, for sure. But Ned, great to talk to you again. And this is a new regime. You got two guys that I'm sure you probably know, and Buster Posey and Mac Manasian running the Giants. What are your thoughts on the new regime as the Giants, moved away from Farhan after a number of years and went to Posey, and Posey hired Manasian?
Well, I think it's obviously a turning of the page, and much respect for ownership, leadership, organization. So we'll see how it goes. They've got a ways to go. So does the rest of the National League West, though, versus LA. So it'll be an interesting year. I'm sure that when the season ends, a long time from now, that both of the leaders you mentioned, they will have learned a lot, probably more than any other year in their careers. But I think it'll be interesting to watch and see how they do, see what their philosophies are, see what they what the tenor of the club is. The Giant teams have historically had a way they play, going back to the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s and into the World Series years. They had a certain way that they played, and I think they got away from that a little bit the last few years, and we'll see if they can restore that, because it was a grinded out with skilled type of approach, going back to even like the Robbie Thompson, Matty Williams days, where you knew that you were going to be in for a battle night in, night out. And, and Dodgers obviously loaded, but I didn't always see that when I was watching San Francisco the last few years. So be good to see change and good to see what they're able to do.
The Dodgers won 98 games, and they had the best run differential in the National League. And then you look at the Yankees. Are they the best run differential in baseball? Then the Yankees, won 94 games. They had the best run differential in the American League. And maybe not a surprise, the two best run differential teams in baseball met up in the World Series, and the Dodgers got it done. Amazing game one, and LA was just thoroughly dominant this year, and they win another World Series under Dave Roberts. How does, from the Giants' perspective, and there's a lot of Giants fans who are very passionate, Ned, and they understand that an awful lot about both clubs. What LA's got going. And the Giants situation, they're a relatively rich team. They have deep pockets. Now, I don't know if they're willing to spend the money because they're paring the payroll back, but they have the money if they want to spend it. How do you think, what would be the best approach to try to compete with LA? And obviously you probably can't do it in 1 year, but what would, you've done this job before. What would be your plan to try to get up off the canvas and to try to compete with the big bad Dodgers?
Well, I think this isn't going to be talent related as much as destination related. I don't know if anybody could name another professional sports franchise in North America that is more of a destination right now than the Dodgers. They pay well. They'll overpay if they need to. They get who they want, and players want to play there. I know San Francisco wasn't like that. Then it became that when Candlestick started to fade away, and Pac Bell Park, now Oracle Field, came out of the ground, and suddenly it became a destination. And it was a destination after that for a long time. But I think when you think about what the Dodgers are able to do, it wasn't about money with Sasaki. Okay, money had really nothing to do with it. It was really about winning more than anything else. And when you have players that defer as much money as they do, and deferrals are usually a tough sell, when you have that many players starting with Ohtani that are willing to defer half their pay, that's telling you it's a destination. So to answer your question, I think that Buster needs to, and his group needs to really make San Francisco a destination again, where players want to play, where they have that attitude. And they've got that little edge to them. I saw it for years. I saw it from across the field. I saw it from working there, and I saw it after I left. They had an edge to them, and it was a destination. You got to make it a destination again, and you got to draft and develop well, because you can't keep spending money on free agency. Look at the giant teams that won the World Series. How many players came out of that system? Answer, many.
Yeah.
Key guys. So those are the two things. You got to draft and develop well, and you've got to make it a destination. So when you do need a free agent, that's one of the top places they think about coming to. I'm not sure it's one of the top places they think about coming to right now. Candidly, I think sometimes they got to overpay to do what they do. And sometimes even overpaying, quote, isn't going to get it done. They got to get to the point where it gets it done.
Who is the key guy in LA down there? Because you're right. LA annually picks behind the Giants because they have a better record, and yet they get more out of the amateur draft than the Giants do. I've heard people shout out guys like Billy Gasparino and some of the different people down there, but you know that the landscape down there. Who would you credit with the Dodgers? I mean, they've had success going back to the 70s or even before that, but I mean, they've had a lot of success in the minor leagues for a lot of years, and I'm sure it's been a lot of different people, Logan White and different people through the years. But who is it right now, Ned, that's so good at drafting and developing down there?
Well, Billy Gasparino runs the draft. So as far as I know, so you start with him, but they also have I think a different advantage. They are never in a hurry to develop a prospect. They are never going to put somebody out there who isn't ready yet, who isn't fundamentally sound, who is going to be shy away from the bright lights. They are so patient. They are one of the most patient organizations I've ever watched. And they wait. They wait and they develop. And when the player comes into big leagues, it's not they're taking the job of a veteran. No, they need everybody to contribute to be successful. They have a great culture. They've done a great job in their drafts and their international signings. And they also have ownership that I think ownership most times, and you just kind of alluded to it, most of the time, the fan bases or the media are going to be critical of ownership and say, do they really want to win? Do they really want to spend the money? Do they really do this? Do they really do that? I mean, you hear it almost with every franchise. LA sells 4 million tickets a year almost. Millions more watch on TV and listen on the radio. They have fans coast to coast. Okay? Ownership is hungrier for victory than the fan base. As big as that fan base is, I believe ownership, starting with Mark Walter, Todd Bowley, Stan Kasten, Magic Johnson, Peter Guber, on and on, they are as hungry for championships and winning. They're the most hungry. And they do what they feel they need to do, which gives your farm system, it's a domino effect, in my opinion. It gives them time to develop. It gives them time. We don't have to draft somebody today that's going to be in the big leagues next year. We can draft somebody that's more projection. And they haven't hit on every draft pick. Nobody does. But they go about it in such a different way. They're just patient with what they do. You look at who they signed this past offseason, how many innings they're going to get out of Sasaki. They just signed Clayton. Clayton's been there a long time. It was my first pick a long time ago. And, they wait. They're going to get Clayton back probably in 90 days from the start of the season, 60 to 90. But they got the patience to do it. And I think that's a key thing. When you draft and develop and you got we got to get this guy to the big leagues quick. Well, you can't make it quick. You can't microwave talent. It takes time to do it right. And I think that most other organizations, they're in a rush. They're in a rush to get guys to the big leagues, whether they're ready or not. And sometimes if a guy's not ready, you're going to have a tough time. And they're going to have a tough time. And you may end up taking the development and making it a longer process, or making it almost unable to be matured and ready to go at any point. And that's what they do. They draft well and international, but you know what? They are patient. They are so patient.
If Giants fans are listening, to this, like I am, we can all collectively barf in a bag, thinking about how good the Dodgers are, but that you're really illustrating it. The Giants do have some good young starters. I really love this kid Birdsong. I love the kid from De La Salle, Kyle Harrison.
Yes.
The kid Roop, has a killer curveball, and they've got a couple other guys. Carson Wisenhunt is a lefty that's coming up, and they signed Verlander, who's 42, and he's coming off a year where he had a 5.48 ERA. But this kind of reminds me a little bit of your 98 pickup of Hershiser. What do you think? And what's a guy like Verlander going to be able to do to try to help, usher the Bird Songs, the Harrisons, the Roops into, kind of being established as big league starters? What do you think his addition is going to mean?
Well, as you sit in the clubhouse, if you're that young group of pitchers, and yes, they are talented, and yes, they've got a chance to be a great staff. If you look around and, who's the oldest, who has the most experience, and week to week it's a toss-up, that's not necessarily good. You look around the room, you got Verlander sitting there. Suddenly now you have somebody that has been through it all, that has been, has won the greatest honor a pitcher can win, has been in a fall classic, all that stuff. And I think that is a good part of the value. People are going to say, well, that's why he's there. Oh, maybe not. But are you going to get 200 innings out of him, or 180 innings out of him, or 160 innings out of him? Probably not. But are you going to get value out of having somebody like him around that group and around that club? And even to teach the young hitters, pitching can teach hitters, and hitters can teach pitching as far as where their weaknesses are, what they need to do. I think it's a great move alone for that, for the experience of who he is, what he's done. When he walks in the room, everybody knows who he is. And when you're a young staff like they've got, and you mentioned a handful of really, really talented young pitchers, he'll be instrumental in their growth. You watch. He will be instrumental in 3, 5, 7 years from now as these young pitchers start to become really established and get to the free agent years, and they start to really establish themselves as keys in the Giants' rotation and organization. Verlander's voice will be in their head from time to time. Do this, think about this, go about it this way, no doubt. So I think there's great value in that. I think without it, you're really a young staff. And a young staff, they need direction, they need GPS, and they need somebody that has walked the walk already. You can explain it to them before they got to experience and learn from failure. Better to learn from experience and those who can teach you than to learn by 5 and 10 with a 6 ERA. It's better to do it the other way. So we'll see, but I think it's a good move.
Yeah. By the way, he'll be wearing Crawford's 35 with Crawford's blessing. I guess they had the conversation. My favorite Giant, the guy that I love the most, is Elliot Ramos. 2 years ago, I went down to spring training and talked to him in this clubhouse before one of the games. And, he was telling me at the time, he's like, man, I got to earn it. I haven't earned it. I got to have a huge year in the minor leagues, and I got to earn it. And, I loved it. I thought it was so refreshing. And then last year he comes into camp and it was like, make it or break it. And he broke, right? He was 2 for 17. He didn't have a single extra base hit. He had a bunch of strikeouts. He had a 328 OPS, 19 plate appearances, and they farmed him out. They optioned him out on March the 11th. And usually you get optioned on March the 11th. That's not a good sign. Then they had a bunch of injuries and they recalled him from the minors just because of those injuries. And he exploded. He made the NL All-Star team. He hit the first right-handed home run into the Cove, wound up the year 269, 24 homers, 23 doubles, 72 RBIs, 6 stolen bases. He's got a huge outfield throwing arm, and he's established himself now as the Giants' everyday left fielder. I bring him up because this year the Giants have another kid with a lot of talent in Marco Luciano. And he's out of options, final option year. He's 23. They've moved him from he's the shortstop of the future to maybe a second baseman. Now they're saying left fielder. Maybe he's a DH. He's focused on trying to play the outfield. At times, he looks too passive at the plate. At times, he's been too aggressive at the plate. He's had injuries. He debuted in the bigs in 23. But, man, the ball comes off this kid's bat, and it just has a different sound, a different look. I just think this guy's way, way, way too talented to give up on. What have you seen Luciano at all? What are your thoughts watching this kid? Because he's got tremendous bat speed.
Well, first a minute on Ramos. I think you got him right. He worked for the opportunity he got last season, which is a great example. And I was really happy to see him do what he did. I've watched him play for a long time in the minor leagues and kind of get blocked here and blocked there and not be able to really bust through. and he worked, and he did it. And I think that's a great example for Luciano and for any other young player to see how he did it and to stay with it and to slow your mind down and not listen to all the noise and get after it. When you have a player that is out of options, and you have to be careful. You have to be careful on both sides of it. And I'll just speak in generalities. You've described them pretty well. In a general way, you have to be able to really evaluate who the player is, who the person is, and make that decision. And maybe you go through it and you leave him on your team and you give him the chance and you're patient with it. I mean, that's a key thing. As I said earlier about the other club, the patience to wait, the patience to let people go through a struggle and continue to stay with them. Don't make it you're 2 for 20, you're done. You're sitting on the bench, you're not playing. Let's figure it out. Let's work through it. A lot of players have a tough time playing with expectation or with make or break. And yeah, we can all say, well, they should be able to. They're big league players. Well, you know what? Everybody develops at a different time. And I'm not talking about Luciano here specifically. I'm just speaking in general. People develop at a different time. And it's the most important thing, I think, for any organization is that you are truthful in your own evaluation of the players who you've drafted and signed and developed. You've got to be truthful with who they are, how they're going to compete, what they need to do, and give them every opportunity to succeed, every opportunity. And that means being patient with struggle, being patient with poor at-bats, or being patient with where do you play them in the field, short, second, left field, DH, all those different things. You got to have a slow mind yourself as a leader and figure out how do we maximize this young player or any young player's ability to get them to be the best they can be. So that you're at that point. And if you get to that point and it's not good enough, okay, then you know. But I think it's imperative. There's not enough great players, Larry. There's not enough great players in the game that you can just, get tired of somebody and be impatient and let them go. And I'd say the same thing in San Jose with the Sharks. We've got to be sure when we trade somebody or we let somebody go that's a young player, got to be sure. We got to be sure that they're not going to make it in that city or that franchise or whatever. We got to be sure. And I think that if they get to that point with him or anybody else, be sure of who you're talking about and the judgment you're making, the evaluation you're making. Because there's not a plentiful of groups to choose from.
No question. Last one for you. I saw you're going to be part of Team Italy for the World Baseball Classic. Tell us a little bit about that opportunity. That sounds kind of fun. What exactly is your role? I know you're the kind of the general manager of that team. What does that entail?
Well, it's putting the team together, and there's certain rules. Your players have to be able to be qualify for an Italian passport in that realm when you're talking about Team Italy. It's one of the great honors of my career. It's not something I sought to do, but when I was offered the opportunity, I couldn't say yes fast enough. I think about my heritage. I think about my grandparents that came from that country over 120 years ago and for a better life in America, and the blessings that I have had and my family have had, and those, not just me, but others in my extended family. And I'm honored to do it. We're a little bit of the David versus the Goliaths, obviously. But
Sure.
You know what? It's been my whole career has been David, me, and versus the Goliaths of everybody else. So I'm primed for it, starting to work on it. And we don't play for another 13 months, but excited for the opportunity. And who knows, may just shock the world and have a big party over at Sedini's and where we used to talk all the time.
That would be awesome. Ned, awesome. Thanks for jumping on, buddy. And we really, I'm looking forward to this summer and talking a lot of Giants baseball with you on the leader. And you got a wealth of information. I always feel like I learn more about the game after one of our long conversations. And I know the audience always appreciates you. And we really appreciate you jumping on tonight. So good to wrap with you. And hopefully we'll do it again in a few weeks.
I thank you very much. And you know what? I wish the Giants and the organization the best. Loved it.
They're going to need it.
Be welcome.
They're going to
nice. See you later.
There you go. I can only be me. I can only be me. But yes, you're right. I do. I think there's a chance this year if the Giants, everything breaks right. I think they could win 85. I think they could win 86. I think they could get in the wild card race in the National League. It's going to take some surprises, but there always are surprises, and it'll be fun watching it nonetheless.